be the today's lecture of the surgery. The today's lecture of the surgery will be on the supracondylar fracture of the humerus. Supracondylar fracture of humerus. In last lecture you have seen about the dislocation of the elbow. Now in today's lecture we will discuss about the supracondylar fracture of the humerus. The supracondylar fracture of the humerus, it is the commonest fracture of the humerus. Commonest fracture of the humerus. It is a fracture through the lower part of the shaft of the humerus. That is through the lower metaphysis of it. So it is what? It is the fracture of the lower part of the shaft of the humerus. That is in the lower 1/3. That is in the lower 1/3. And it is the commonest fracture in the upper extremity. It usually occurs there. Now, the type of the fracture of the humerus of the supracondylar fracture of the humerus one there, isn't it? There are the two main types are there. One is the transverse or oblique fracture. Second is the T or Y type fracture. Second is the T or Y type fracture. The most commonest fracture is the transverse fracture. Transverse fracture, isn't it? It is common in the children. Common in the children, and it occurs from the falling on the outstretched hand. So do you understand? The most commonest variety or type of the supracondylar fracture is the transverse. Sometimes it will be the oblique. It may be the oblique, and it is common in the children. Actually, the supracondylar fracture of the humerus is common in the children. It is a childhood fracture. It occurs in between the age of 5 to 7 years. 5 to 7 years. This is a supracondylar fracture. It is transverse one there. Occurs from falling on the outstretched hand. And it is of the two types. That is extension type and the flexion type. Flexion type. The extension type, among all the fractures of the supracondylar region of the humerus, is a transverse fracture. Transverse fracture. This fracture occurs, the transverse fracture, which extension type, isn't it? Is the commonest one there. Extension type of the supracondylar fracture of the humerus is commonest of all the fractures. It occurs from the falling on the outstretched hand with semi-flexed elbow. With the semi-flexed elbow. Isn't it? And when the person falls on the semi-flexed elbow, child falls on the elbow, there is a forceful pronation of the arm. Pronation of the forearm. Isn't it? And when the fracture occurs, the displacement takes place, and the displacement of the lower fragment takes place. The lower fragment displaces first the backward, upward displacement is there, caused by the force of the trauma passing through the upper end of the ulna. So when the child falls, isn't it, with the flexion, so force will be traveled like this, and with traveling of the force, what happens? The force direction is upward and the backward, and with that one lower end of the humerus, it will be displaces backward and upward. Isn't it? The second, backward angulation. As it displaces backward, it goes like this posteriorly, causing the backward angulation. And the lateral displacement. Lateral displacement. And the fourth one is the pronation of the forearm. Pronation of the forearm. So this is a displacement of the extension type of the fracture. Now, the second is the flexion type of the fracture. The flexion type of the fracture, so this is the flexion type on that. Second, it is a rare type of the transverse fracture, which occurs in the children, and this fracture occurs from falling on outstretched hand with extended elbow. Extended elbow, where the lower fragment it displaces upward and the forward. Now we can say first forward and then upward. It is elbow extended, upward and the forward displacement is there. Now why it is called as an extension type? Because here after the displacement, elbow remains extended. Patient cannot flex. And here in flexion type, it is called flexion because after the displacement of the fracture head, patient cannot extend elbow, it remains flexed. So that's about the flexion type. So do you understand? The commonest fracture is the transverse fracture. Isn't it? Rare, sometimes it may be oblique. It occurs in the children then from falling on osteohand. It's of two types. The what? Extension type and the flexion type, and it is the commonest. Extension and commonest. You will see in this figure. So this is what? The transverse fracture. Which one type? The extension type. See here, where this lower end of the humerus here, it is transverse. It displaces where? Backward, upward, and then laterally. See, this is a posterior angulation. Posterior angulation. So do you understand? Now, and this is a flexion type of fracture. See, here it remains flexed. After the displacement, the elbow remains flexed, and here the elbow remains extended. So this is a transverse fracture. Then second type, main type is a T or Y fracture. The T or Y fracture, this type of the fracture occurs in the adult. Occurs in the adult, and it occurs from the falling on the point of the elbow. Falling on the point of elbow, a direct trauma to the humerus. To the humerus. Isn't it? Here, either alternum will be fracture the humerus or humerus will fracture the alternum. Is dependent upon the degree of flexion of elbow. Degree of flexion of elbow. Do you understand? So this is T or Y of fracture. So these are the types of the fracture, isn't it? Remember, as you have been seeing, dislocation of the elbow, same injury which falling on the outstretched hand in adult will cause the posterior dislocation of elbow, and falling on the outstretched hand in children which causes the supracondylar fracture of the humerus. So do you understand what to mean the supracondylar fracture and its type? Its type. Then we go for the clinical features. Clinical features are the first one, except in T or Y fracture. Except in a T or Y fracture, the patient is children, or commonly the patient is the children in majority of the cases. While in T or Y fracture, the patient is adult. Patient is adult. Second, there is a pain which is progressively increasing. At the time of fracture, there is a less pain, and as time passes, it gets increases pain. Second, swelling. The swelling around the what? The lower end of the humerus at supracondylar region is a maximum. Limitation of the movements of the elbow joints. Person can perform the movements, but limited movements, and these movements may be the painful. Limitation of the movements of the elbow joint. Then the backward shift just above the elbow is apparent, and the common extension type of the fracture. Which backward shift, and it shows the deformity is that of the angulation. Isn't it? Our vein is to be there where? Above the elbow. Then the point you should differentiate from the supracondylar fracture of the humerus should be differentiated from the dislocation of the elbow, especially posterior dislocation of elbow, because the clinical features may be confused in the diagnosis, isn't it? Because they will be the same. What? Pain will be there, swelling will be there, limitation of the movements will be there. But what will differentiate the supracondylar fracture of the humerus from the posterior dislocation of the elbow? The differentiating points are, the first one, the patient is child. While in dislocation of the elbow, the patient will be adult. Or here, patient is child. Then the maximum tenderness over the supracondylar region. Where? In case of here. And then though painful, but some amount of the movements are possible. Where? In case of supracondylar fracture. While in dislocation of the elbow, there is complete loss of the movement. Where? In dislocation of elbow. While in the supracondylar fracture, some sort of the movements are possible. Even though they are limited. You have seen here, limitation. But can be possible. Then and these movements may be the painful also. Then very diagnostic features that is correctly or very accurately will distinguish the dislocation of the elbow, posterior dislocated elbow from the supracondylar fracture, that is relation between the three bony prominence. Three bony prominence. You will see at our elbow the three bony prominences are there. 1, 2 and 3. 1, 2 and 3. 1 is of the medial epicondyle. This is tip of ulnaron and the lateral epicondyle. So what relation will be there? In case of the supracondylar fracture, where there is a extension type 1 posterior displacement, the three prominence will be remain in the same line or same plane. Why? Because whole joint displaces along with the lower end of the humerus and the radius and ulna. Do you understand? But in case of the dislocation of elbow, that is posterior dislocation of the elbow, what happens? This lower articular bones, which radius and ulna displaces posterior. So what will happen? This will be gets altered. These 2 points will remain in the same line, and this will be goes upward. So this relation will be altered. Do you understand? This is a very characteristic diagnostic point that to differentiate supracondylar fracture from the posterior dislocation of elbow. Do you understand? So these are the clinical features and the differentiating points are there. Now we will come to the next point. The complications. But before going to complications, you should remember that in every case of the supracondylar fracture, proper examination must be made while clinically examining the patient. Number 1, the radial pulse to exclude the injury to the brachial artery, because there is more chances, you will see in complication later, chances of injury to the brachial artery is more. So while clinical examination, you should examine the radial pulse. If you are getting the pulse, normally it indicates there is no injury to the brachial artery. But in some patient where injury to brachial artery is there, in such cases we doesn't get the pulse. If we doesn't get the pulse, it means that there is injury to brachial artery. In such cases, we must do that first, occlude the artery here, brachial artery here, to preventing the further blood loss. Otherwise, patient will get the hypovolemic shock due to loss of blood. Second, the nerves, particularly median nerve, should be examined. It is also most complication injury. We will see discussing complication later. So that's why these two things should be kept in the mind while clinical examination. Then complications. The complications are there. These are the complications are there. The number 1 is immediate complications. The immediate complications are the injury to the brachial artery, either it may tear, lacerate, or the contusion with thrombosis and kinking and the spasms will be there. Where injury to the brachial artery is the most commonest complication in case of the supracondylar fracture. Second one complication, injury to the median nerve by the protruding lower end of the proximal fragments or the upper fragment of the humerus. Here it will get protrude and it will cause injury to the median nerve. Median nerve, which upper fragment, or you can say proximal fragment. The next one, the associated bone joint injuries. Associated bone joint injuries are there. So radial ulnar joint is may get injured, and the capitulum may get injured, isn't it? So that injury will be occurred there. Then fracture line extending into the elbow joint, especially in case of TRY fracture, isn't it? Here fracture line is where supracondylar region and it may extend downward into the elbow joint. But it is in a only T or Y fracture, not in case of transverse fracture. Then next one is a fracture of the medial epicondyle, fracture of the medial epicondyle, then the fracture of the head of the radius and the fracture of the ulnar process of ulna. It is also commonest one fracture occurring with the supracondylar fracture of humerus. So these are the immediate complications of it one there. Then the delayed complications. These are the malunion, which is the commonest one that malunion is there. The little disturbances in the alignment is very common, but this usually gets modulated in the child with the growth of the child, isn't it? As age grows, so it will get modulated there. Then with the backward displacement and the tilt are not corrected. Lower end of the upper fragment projecting the beneath the brachialis in front will act as a mechanical obstruction to the flexion. Means there is difficulty in the movements of the elbow. If this is a backward shift, it is not corrected properly, so it will cause the difficulty in the flexion. Then uncorrected sideways tilt rotation. It is rarely one that. Rarely cubitus valgus deformity may be occurs in this may cause a late ulnar nerve palsy by the stretching the nerve. This is the ulnar side. Cubitus valgus. Then joint stiffness is also very common. Joint stiffness, and the joint stiffness is in a TRY fracture in adults when there is malunion is there. Then the median nerve or ulnar nerve palsy due to injury to the median ulnar nerve. Myositis ossificans traumatica. It is a common delayed complication in the supracondylar fracture of the humerus, where there is what? The calcification in the muscles. Is it? Which are around the site of the fracture. This myositis ossificans. We will discuss in next lecture. Then Oakman's ischemic necrosis may occur. Oakman's ischemic necrosis may occur from the compression on the nerves. It is also commonest one there. So these are the delayed malunion, joint stiffness, and the median nerve ulnar palsy, myositis ossificans, and the Oakman's ischemic necrosis. These five are the complications of the supracondylar fracture of the humerus. Then the treatment of the fracture of the supracondylar region of the humerus. Here, the one thing you should remember, before starting the treatment of the fracture proper, we must keep in the mind there is a possibility or chances of the injury to the brachial artery. It may occur at the time of the fracture, or sometimes it may occur during the reduction of the fracture. First of all, we have to rule out that there is injury to the brachial artery during the fracture, and if there, it should be first artery should be occluded and it should be repaired first. It should repair first and then proceed for the further treatment. If it is not occurred, it is excluded by how it is excluded or rule out by examining the radial pulse. If it doesn't get the pulse, it indicates there is injury to the brachial artery. If you are getting the normal pulse, it indicates there is no injury to the brachial artery. Then you can proceed further. So do you understand? Now, for the convenience, the treatment of the supracondylar fracture of the humerus is divided into two groups. One is the treatment of the uncomplicated and second is the treatment of the complicated fracture. In treatment of the uncomplicated, there is a treatment of extension type and the flexion type. Extension type and the flexion type in case of the transverse fracture. So here in a transverse fracture, the treatment of the extension type, the first is the reduction, second is the immobilization. Reduction and the immobilization. Here, reduction of the supracondylar of the fracture in extension type, which is transverse one, it is carried out by the closed manipulation. If it is uncomplicated, isn't it? Carried out by closed manipulation, isn't it? It should be carried out under the general anesthesia. So before reduction, anesthesia will be on, and then the reduction should be carried out. So what steps should be there? There are steps in the reduction is there. We should be carried out methodologically or sequentially. And these are, number one, this the surgeon has to be hold the hand of the patient with his one hand, either shaking the hand. Shaking the hand. So here, first one, that what? The one hand of the surgeon pulls the forearm downwards and say what? That as I was explaining there, the surgeon has to hold the hand of the person, forearm of the patient with his hand, either here like this or either shaking the hand. Can be hold either shaking the hand, and have to use gentle downward traction which bring the lower fragment downwards. And that while giving the traction, the elbow should be kept flexed. Elbow should be kept flexed, isn't it? So where the lower end which goes upward, which gone upward, it comes downward. Then second step, with the traction still maintained and the forearm is supinated. As you have been seen with this lesson, the forearm was pronated. Forearm was pronated. Now it should be supinated. With the traction should be maintained, and with the traction, it should be whatever pronated should be supinated like this. Then the lateral displacement should be corrected by pushing with the another hand of the surgeon, isn't it? And then this second hand of the surgeon you should place like that. How? You should place like that, where the thumb will come on the biceps. Thumb will place on the biceps, and these fingers on the posterior knee, and then flex the elbow. Understand? So these are the steps of the reduction are there. After doing these steps, then you have to immobilize. The immobilization can be done by using the plaster, either the complete plaster or the posterior plaster cast. Complete encircling plaster posterior cast, isn't it? That extending from the upper 1/3 of the humerus to the wrist, and then you can do the collar and cuff sling and immobilize for the 4 weeks are there. 4 weeks. But remember, after immobilization, we should make the observations. These observations. What observations? Because after the plaster, swelling may occur. It may compresses either the vessels, blood vessels, or the nerves, and that may causes the arterial complication where Oakman's necrosis or the compartment syndrome. So how should we know? By observing this one, isn't it? So if there is any one of these signs is there about severe pain, isn't it? Severe pain in the forearm and the hand, painful movements are there. We are getting here the severe pain, the painful movements are there. Then the absence of returning the bellhead and the discoloration and the numbness of the fingers. If any one of these one or combined with these ones is present, it indicates that there is a compression over the vessels and the nerves. In such a cases, you should release the plaster. Isn't it? And ensure slight movements, and then again replastering should be done for the immobilization. You understand? So this is a treatment for the transverse extension type of the fracture. In flexion type of the fracture, simple, where the same it should be deducted by the close manipulation, but here the gentle traction should be applied with the with extension of the elbow. Isn't it? And immobilization should be also continued by using either the complete encircling plaster or the posterior plaster cast with extended elbow, which is in flexion type of fracture. You understand? Then treatment of TRY. The treatment of TRY can be carried out by the close manipulation under the anesthesia, isn't it? And but in TRY the slight movements can be allowed, and the immobilization can be done either using the plaster or by simply giving the collar and cuff sling in the adults. So do you understand? And sometimes it may need that of what? Open reduction in rare cases of the T or Y fracture. Then lastly, the treatment of complicated fracture. The treatment of a complicated fracture should be done by first correcting the complication, and then proper reduction and immobilization. For example, if there is injury to the brachial artery, either laceration or the tear, that should be repaired first. If injury to the nerve, that should repair first. If injury to any surrounding articular structures, that should repair first, and then go for the reduction of the fracture and the immobilization. Do you understand? So this is a treatment of fracture of the supracondylar region of the humerus. That hope you understand. Isn't it? Watch the lectures properly and prepare yourself.